you. Thank you for the introduction, and it's always a pleasure to do something for IALLT. Before I get started, though, I want to give a shout out to Edwige Simone, who I have to say sincerely prepared me through her graduate certificate programs at the University of Colorado at Boulder. So thank you, Edwige, because you really did prepare me for what we didn't know what was going to happen. So I am just going to quickly share my PowerPoint with you. It's really not long because my presenters and I wanted to do more of a roundtable discussion about things I think that K-12 teachers are dealing with that is, you know, different than probably higher ed. So we wanted to have a somewhat fun title. As you can see, don't panic, you probably won't mess this up that bad. So we're just going to share with you some perspectives of what we're doing and how we're handling the situation. So to start out with, we are going to, these are our talking points in our introduction that I'll kind of go back and forth. But for right now, I just want to personally introduce myself. My name is Nathalie Ettzevoglou, and I am a French high school teacher at Alpharetta High School in Alpharetta, Georgia. And we jumped into the distance learning on March 13th. So Monday was like a normal school day, and then we had a teacher confirmed in the county with a virus, and they closed down schools Tuesday and Wednesday. Thursday was a normal school day, and by the end of the day, our superintendent closed down the schools. Friday, we went into school for half a day and had 3 hours to get our lives together. And well, that was the end of that. So, and then it was just distance learning from there. So I'll pass my introduction to another colleague.
I go? Why not? Hi, I'm Erin Sunday. I teach in Yamhill. I live outside of Portland, Oregon, and I teach in Yamhill Carleton High School, which is a really small rural school south of Portland, about 30 miles south of Portland. And I teach middle and high school because our intermediate and our high school buildings are right next to each other on a really small campus. I have some intermediate school students come up and take Spanish as well at the high school building. And Oregon has been a funny introduction to the online learning. Our school was canceled by the governor a week before our spring break. And so at the time, we just sort of treated it like a snow week, like maybe we'll make up that week at the end of the school year. We weren't really worrying too much about online learning. We were supposed to come back right after spring break. And then we had our spring break, which was last week. And then this week we were told that we were doing supplementary education, and we were not allowed to give grades or credit for the work that we were doing. So everybody geared up and learned and about, you know, using online platforms, thinking about how we could provide supplementary education. And then last night at like 9 o'clock at night, we were told, wait a minute, never mind. Now we are going to give grades and credit. I think probably gearing up for, you know, maybe not coming back for the rest of the semester like a lot of schools are doing. So today was kind of chaos, trying to figure out how that might look. So we're a little bit behind some of the other states in terms of our rollout of online learning because of the weird timeline and how it coincided with our spring break.
Then I'm Michael Vo. I teach at Evansdale Elementary, which is inside Atlanta, Georgia in DeKalb County. It's one of the largest counties, I guess, around here in Atlanta. It's different because I teach at the elementary level. I actually teach in a dual language immersion program, so half of our day is in, or my students' day is in French, and they learn math and science in French, and then they also learn French literacy. Our day was kind of, or like, our lead up to distance learning was very similar to Nathalie's situation. We went a regular day or like a regular week from Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, and then Friday was a scheduled work day for teachers anyway, but then we didn't know that Thursday would be the last time we would see our students. And so ever since we've been doing, I guess this is our third week doing distance learning.
Okay, so let me go back and share. So one of the first things that the three of us were talking about was accessibility. And that's a really big topic for us to undertake as educators in public schools. We don't, you know, our school made it a point actually on Thursday before we left. I think there was like this anticipation that it was going to happen, that we were going to close down, but we didn't know for how much time. So on Thursday, our school did go through device deployment to ensure that the majority of our students had devices. But they're still, and we're actually still this week, still giving out devices, even though we're in the third week of what we are calling for Fulton County teleschool. So it's kind of been an interesting thing. And then the other thing that we also have to deal with is Wi-Fi capabilities. There is no guarantee that all of our students do have Wi-Fi, or, you know, with libraries closed, what are we going to do? Do they have to go out to a parking lot? Like, do they have to swing by a McDonald's to try to get Wi-Fi? So, you know, it's just been really interesting. And then what do we do with students who don't have any device, who can't access it, you know, who don't have Wi-Fi capabilities? What we do about that? And I think in large part, most schools have decided that teachers are going to have to make paper packets, and those are going to have to either be mailed to the students or picked up at schools. So for where I am particularly located right now, I would say that the vast majority of our students are equipped with either their own personal laptops or a strong Wi-Fi capability at home, but that is certainly not the story for every single one of our students.
Because of where I teach in a rural location, we actually have a lot of students that don't have internet access. We have students that live pretty remotely and live in some hills. So either they literally just don't have the internet, it doesn't reach to them. There are still people in the United States that just can't access the internet, or they have like really slow satellite internet. So doing things like downloading and watching videos and that kind of thing, if we wanted to do, you know, an ed puzzle or a Zoom, those kinds of things that take a lot of bandwidth just aren't going to be possible for those students. Some other schools in the area they're trying to do hotspots, like drive buses out and create hotspots for students to use. But because our students are so rural and so spread out, that's not a possibility for my school. So we are doing the same thing that Nathalie's school is doing, which is we are providing online learning for most students. I think, I don't know what the number is, but maybe 80% of our students that do have access to the internet. And then we're doing packet work for those students that do not.
So our school is it's very similar, but the only difference, or the biggest difference, I think, at the elementary level is that our students don't get to really take home any devices. So that means if they are using a device, it's usually a parent's laptop, maybe a brother's or sister, maybe one of their devices that the school has already given them. Because in our county, middle schoolers and high schoolers can receive like a Chromebook, but they just don't have those kind of capabilities for the elementary level. So most of our students are using someone else's device. And as a result, our student, or like at least my students, are getting on at all different times of the day. Like, for example, I was receiving like work yesterday at 12 o'clock. And, you know, this is like a 9 or 10-year-old at 12 o'clock staying up to do their work because they just, like, they have too many other like family members that are sharing one laptop. I also have a lot of problems where like students are walking, just like Natalie was talking about. They have to try to walk to maybe like a McDonald's or a Starbucks to try to get internet. And then some of these businesses, they have internet still, and some are closed down, and so they don't have internet. So then they're walking around looking for internet. We're also trying to do packets, but the only problem with packets is that our students they can't receive feedback. So when they do try to do problems, or especially like in the foreign language section, it's really hard for students to do packets because, I mean, it's really just going to be a material that they've already learned, so that they're not going to be learning anything new. Whereas the other students that are able to work online, they are going to learn new material, because at this point, our county is saying we need to teach at least 30 minutes of new content material each week, so that the students are like progressing in some way instead of just being in one place and like stagnating.
Yeah. And that's definitely interesting, because as the three of us were talking, we were also talking about, you know, what is the expectation for, are we supposed to continue teaching brand new content material? How much time are we supposed to be dedicating to that? How much work is a student supposed to be receiving every single day? And for my situation personally, the county dedicated specific days to content. So for example, on Monday, it's ELA. Tuesday, it's math. Wednesday is world language, as well as electives, which is already a problem because for high school students, they can take 2 or 3 electives in their schedule easily. So, you know, like, where does the balance come with that? And where is their priorities? And then Thursday is science day, and Friday is social studies. So on each one of those days, students are only supposed to receive 120 minutes total of work. So, you know, that becomes hard with world language, especially to try to do like synchronous learning. Sometimes it's nearly impossible because they've got 2 other classes or 3 other classes that they also have work to do. So it's just been interesting. And then the other question that we were also talking about is attendance. Like, what does that mean, especially for high school teachers? You know, for seniors and for graduation purposes, for juniors and for their application process for colleges. Likewise for seniors, they're freaking out. That's the bottom line, is that, you know, the students are really feeling the stress. So I do appreciate the fact that my county did limit the amount of minutes that they could get, you know, certain amount of work a day. It actually works out, but they still do feel overwhelmed.
In terms of instructional minutes in Oregon, of course, things have changed between yesterday and today, because yesterday we weren't giving credit or grades, and when we woke up this morning, suddenly we were giving credit and grades. And so what we've talked about, we haven't received any well, actually that's not true. The Oregon Department of Education has said about 30 minutes a day per subject area at the middle and high school level. So about 30 minutes-ish of Spanish a day. At my school, students, a full schedule is a 7-period day. So that works out to be about 3.5 hours of instruction a day. Right now, we're still just trying to roll this out to students and figure out how to, you know, make sure that all of our students have devices, and figure out which students need packets. So we haven't started with like the full, you know, online teaching at this point. So we're not sure how that's going to actually play out in reality, but in theory, that's what we've been directed to do.
Michael, you have anything to add, or should we move on to the next one?
No, I think I don't have anything to add there.
Okay.
Yeah.
So the other thing that comes with a package deal of, you know, K-12 teachers is accommodations for students. And that was actually a really interesting conversation that we all had. Probably Erin more so than the rest of us, but we are still expected to maintain the accommodations. So anything that's been outlined in an IEP or a 504, we still need to abide by what is there. And specifically, that came up in the conversation for assessments. My school did say that we are allowed to do assessments and conduct them if we want to. But we find that we need to kind of like change the traditional format, because we are not there to literally monitor what's going on. And so, you know, when you put a quiz online or you design a different type of assessment, it's, you know, we don't want them to cheat ideally. In the real world, but you know, anything is possible for these types of in this given environment. So we do have to design assessments that are different, and I personally am moving in more into like the project-based assignments for assessments.
Yeah.
But extended time, we still need to respect that, for example. And I think that's probably like one of the most common accommodations that we have to do.
Yeah, I agree. I think, with extended time, actually doing instruction at home, it's pretty easy to give that accommodation. They can take as much time as they want. They're doing at home. So some of these accommodations actually work pretty well in an online environment. I think the reason I talked about the accommodations a lot when we were prepping for this is because I think that's the reason that Oregon originally said that we weren't going to be providing credit and we weren't going to be providing grades is that it's so hard to have that equity for students that have special needs or students that have accommodations. And there was a concern that if we can't provide those accommodations and instruction for those students, then we shouldn't be providing it for the others as well. I think that changed once they realized that we might be out for the rest of the semester, and not giving any credit for an entire semester of school would create a lot more problems than it would solve, however.
We definitely also have a lot of problems with individual education programs. But I have specifically a couple maybe 3 students that have paraprofessional support. And one of the problems is that they can't receive these supports in the classroom. We're lucky enough to have like extra hands, but I mean, at this point, especially because for our school, we're still not really allowed to use, I guess, live communication like this. We can't use Zoom at this point. And so, I mean, our paraprofessionals are, for these students, they really just, they can't do anything. They had to sit on the sidelines. And it's really hard. It's hard for them, it's hard for the students, because then we get at least I get a lot of communication from parents asking us, what are we following the IEP? Are we following the 504? Are we doing what we're supposed to do required by law? And we haven't really gotten a lot of clear answers. I mean, we've gotten some like new details at the beginning of the week saying that certain specific accommodations can still be used. For example, like paraprofessionals, they can check in more with their students, but the help that they normally would give these students to help them understand the work that they're doing is just not happening anymore. And it's kind of detrimental for these students.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think we are ready to move on to the next point, everyone. Okay, so Michael kind of like led us right into that, and platforms and resources, benefits and challenges. So I think when this all started, like all of a sudden everybody was like on the Zoom bandwagon, and I love Zoom, but it's just been banned in my county because Zoom bombing and stealing data and people doing inappropriate things and whatever. And yeah, of course, those are things that we need to be mindful when we're doing video conferencing with our students, of course. So right now, for me, the only alternative that I have is using Microsoft Teams. And the students have been very adamant in telling me that they can't stand Microsoft Teams, but I'm like, we don't have a choice, you guys. This is the only platform where I can see you. And for me personally, it is important for me to be able to see my students when we can manage some type of synchronous learning together. So, that's definitely been a challenge. The other challenge that I face too is that many of the teachers in my department are not very tech savvy. So I've been like helping them as much as I possibly can. And I really got to give them credit for really stepping up and jumping to the challenge that this particular situation has literally thrown the whole world into. So it's really like, while the challenge of technology does lie out there, and while we realize that not everybody is trained or not everybody has like the comfort level, I just feel like we've really bonded a whole lot more together, like as a team. And it's just really great to be able to bounce ideas off of each other and be like, okay, So how can we take what we would traditionally do in a classroom and put it into some type of platform for online learning? So, and I really do appreciate that so many ed tech companies have opened up their platforms for free for so many teachers and educators, you know, whether K-12 or even like higher ed, because that's truly amazing. However, the problem is, one of the challenges that we face is, does my county allow me to use that particular platform or app because it is not accepted as a recognized education tool by the county? So that kind of, it's irritating, I'm not gonna lie. But at the same time, you know, like we have to, as world language teachers always know, we always have to adapt. And pretty much every single tool that's out there is not necessarily made for us, but we always take what's out there. We have to manipulate it to our advantage so it serves our students. And, you know, and that's what we're trying to do. That's literally what everybody's trying to do, is teachers, students, administrators, districts, counties, and superintendents. Really, at the end of the day, we're just trying to do the best for our kids. So we just have to deal with the challenges, but there are plenty of benefits there. And I'll talk about that a little bit more when I talk to you about the particular platform that I use with my students. Anyone else?
Well, at my school, because we are rural and we have, you know, issues with internet access, and also potentially issues, the issue of having, you know, several siblings in the same house, sharing the same internet, sharing the same device, that kind of, we've decided to focus on asynchronous learning. And so not doing Zoom at this point, or you know, Google or anything like that. They licenses for the entire district for Screencastify and for Edpuzzle. And they're really, you know, trying hard to give us the tools that we need in order to provide education to our students. So I think that, you know, an advantage of a small district, a bit more flexible, like, and you can, you know, quickly. So we're 12th graders are using Google Classroom and the
Uh-oh.
I lost her. Well, as we wait for her to come back, I mean, I heard her say something about Google Classroom. I think one of the hardest things that, or one of the best things that is happening, like as we go through this particular moment in time, is that there are a lot of material or a lot of resources and platforms that you can choose to use in the world. And a lot of people are being very generous to provide new resources or free resources for teachers to use. But I guess one of the biggest problems for me is, or really one of the biggest challenges, is figuring out what's a good resource to actually use. Because a lot of the programs are, I mean, there are lots of programs out there and a lot of them overlap. They do the same stuff. And so, especially for elementary learners, it's really hard for them to figure out, you know, how do I do this? And it kind of becomes a even bigger burden on the parents, because the parents have to figure out, well, my student doesn't know how to do this, so I have to learn how to do this. So teacher, teach me how to teach my kid how to do this. So, I mean, there are lots of benefits with a lot of free materials, but it also becomes a challenge too. So it almost becomes, you really have to learn how to simplify the material. But sometimes even like with our district at this moment, it feels like we might be simplifying materials too much. For example, I mean, like, because we are going through this time where we can't really have recordings of students. For example, a really good one that I really like is Flipgrid. Is something that we've used in the classroom many times, where the students can talk to each other or like answer a prompt in like the target language, and then other students can also, I guess, reply to students' responses. We're being told that at this point we can't really do that anymore because we can't require that a student has to submit a recording. So at this point, it might turn into more of everyone gets to call my Mr. Vo's Google Voice numbers to answer the questions. Because the other problem is that you also, I mean, I know that we had like problems with whether or not we could record even our faculty meetings because not everyone had a kind of like a media release where we could record material. So it becomes a big challenge because there are a lot of resources. It's just, I guess, figuring out what we can use and what we can't use.
Yeah, I totally agree with you on that. I think from the get-go, all of a sudden, it was like just these pouring of like different apps and platforms and do this and do that and let's try this. And I kind of felt like everybody was just kind of learned something new just because, you know, it's like, it was just pandemonium and, you know, nobody was expecting this and we just kind of roll with the punches. But it is, I don't know about everybody else, but it was extraordinarily overwhelming to get all of a sudden just like this deluge of products being thrown at you. And I think that for a lot of folks who are not necessarily comfortable with tech, it was like, oh my God, what is this? What do I do? You know, like, I don't even know where to start anymore. And I think that from the get-go, my approach was, I don't really want to change so much what I would do in a face-to-face setting. I just want to keep things that my students are used to doing, that they're comfortable in continuing to do, and that really does not require me to reinvent the wheel at all. So, you know, I depend on Google Forms, quizzes, we play Gimkit. I mean, like any kind of game that the kids are used to playing, I would still do that. And I was thankful that they were able to meet with me synchronously. I was using Zoom before I was told we can't. But they had a lot of fun on it, and it was just keeping like our relationship alive. And it was important for me to see them, and I think they wanted to see me, and more importantly, they wanted to see each other because they're used to being in that environment together for our particular class period. So that was key for me in deciding, okay, what tools am I going to be able to use that still allow me to have a sense of normalcy, not only with the material that I'm trying to teach, but also so that I'm not overwhelming my students.
Yeah, I think that's an important point too. I disappeared for a minute. I don't know if you already said this, but it's overwhelming for us. But I also think that it's overwhelming, you know, be learning in this new way, in this new environment, and have a bunch of new platforms thrown at them and new sign-ins that they have to create. I already used like a lot of online tools with my students before all of this started happening, so I'm continuing to use those same tools because we were used to them in my class. But I'm not doing anything new that we already want to overwhelm students that way.
Yeah. Okay, so maybe our last point before we open up for discussion and all. What does distance learning look like for us? So I'm going to stop sharing this particular screen right now so I can share with you a different screen. So on that Thursday, before we were told, you know, we're gone for some indefinite amount of time, I have been using Seesaw with my students all year long. And I actually had their parents sign up too, because that was my means of communication with them. Because one, first and foremost, that is an approved platform in our county. So I knew I was safe with that. But I also wanted another platform that would allow me more flexibility to conduct class in a similar way that I would do in the classroom. So my particular choice was, or is, Wakelet. So Wakelet is awesome. So let me just stop sharing this particular screen right here. and I'm going to share with you what I have created with Wakelet. Okay, so on Thursday before we left, I didn't teach any new material at all. I didn't even give a quiz that I was supposed to give, nothing at all, because I knew it was going to happen. It was just a matter of time. So I decided to set my students up on Wakelet. And they're very used to me throwing just about any kind of technological tool at them. So they were just kind of like, oh, here she goes again, mad at me, doing something new. And I was like, yeah, well, you know, we got to keep it real, guys. And then I was like, so this is what we're going to use. And everybody signed up really easily. It's free. And I had them do a practice creation with me so that I knew that they would know how to use this particular platform. So this is the platform that I'm using with them, and this is literally the link that I share with them every single week where they find their work posted. And it makes things a whole lot easier because I have one platform with everything I could ever want for them to do. So this is for my 2 honors class, and what I really love about this platform, it is there is an immersive reader in there, which also provides accommodations for students who need text to be read aloud to them in the target language or in English. And they can also, I'm just going to click on this so you can see what I mean. And they can also enlarge the text if they need to. So I do have some students who do have some visual aid problems. So this was my way of letting them know that they could still, you know, have that visual aid accommodation with them at all times. So you can see here, right, I can enlarge the text as large as I want to, which is great, or I can make it as small as I want to. I can increase the space or not, you know, I can play around with the themes, and I thought this was pretty cool, but there are grammar features available for the students. So for example, I have just highlighted all of my nouns in there. Well, that's not exactly accurate because that's a verb, but you know, in a general scheme of things, it's pretty neat. And then there's also a reading preference where they can translate. They can highlight specific lines that they need to read at a time. And in some of them, there is like a Pictionary. This isn't exactly the best example to choose, but there is like a built-in picture dictionary, which is really cool. So that's why I chose this one, because I felt that it would be able to accommodate the needs of the students that I still have to uphold. So this is what we did our first week over here. And as you can see, I also decided to keep some of a time check for them so that they would know how long each activity would take. So we played GimKit together because, like most students everywhere, it's just addictive and they can't get enough of it. So I want to make this a pleasant experience for them. So we're going to play. And actually what I ended up doing was I combined both of my on-level sections into one Zoom group. So I had like 45 kids playing, and it was insane. It was so much fun. There was like a different level of competition, and it got crazy. And then I did the same thing with my 2 classes of honor students as well. And then it was just like nuts. So it was like a party, and we had a great time. And then I stayed on the Zoom session, and the next 2 activities were self-paced. So again, you know, fulfilling the accommodations for students who needed like not a timed environment, but I also, the purpose was like, just do a good job and take your time, and I'm going to be here if you need to ask me any question. So it was more of like a comfort sort of zone that I was trying to establish with them. And then finally, I asked them to do a little speaking activity here because they are used to doing that in the classroom with me. So I took these 4 questions that normally I would have assigned as like a partner activity, and then we would have come back and like do little skits with it or whatever. And I simply asked them to make a video and upload it to YouTube as unlisted and send me a link. So, and all of that was pretty achievable for them to do. I have to say, I literally had 100% turn-in rate for for this particular assignment, which is pretty awesome because I know that not everybody has, you know, actively engaged students every single week. So this is the platform that I'm using for them, and this is going to be their activity tomorrow. And I decided to get creative with Flipgrid too, and show some of what, like, my funny side too, because I used emojis and all those creative things, wonderful things that Flipgrid does. And their activity for this week, because I got inspired by a million pictures all over Facebook, is they are actually going to be recreating, after doing some virtual scavenger hunts in museums, that they are going to find artwork that they are going to recreate and have fun at home with things that are around them, and just have a fun creative activity. And yes, I'm about to, like, I might go viral tomorrow and I might be famous and I can live with it, but I decided to do it too today. So I wanted them to see that I can also participate in this fun, but I also wanted to provide them with a model the same way that I would have done so in the physical classroom. So I think they're probably going to think I've lost my mind, and I'm okay with that because they know I do silly things all the time. But I wanted to provide them with a model example the same way that I do in the classroom every single day, except now this is just adapted so that, and yes, I know there's a whole lot of English, but my purpose is I want them to understand what they are doing and the process and the expectation, so that it's clear and nothing's like lost in translation. So this is my choice of Wakelet, and I love it.
Oh my gosh, Natalie, you're so creative. I'm literally like taking notes. Do this with my students as you're talking. I'm not going to show my screen because all of my platforms are populated with students, so I don't want to share their names. I also, like Natalie, I used Seesaw. And I've been using Seesaw for about 3 years now. But when all of this started happening, my district said they wanted every teacher on Google Classroom in order to streamline how materials are distributed to students, and so that students don't have to go back and forth between a bunch of different platforms, and so that their parents don't have to have platforms. So I've shifted all of my work over onto Google Classrooms, which was a lot of work, but it's done now. And I also, just before all of this happened, I had started using Classcraft with my students, which is a way to gamify a class. So I'm continuing to use Classcraft with my students. And Classcraft, and it's actually pretty nice because Classcraft and Google Classroom interfaces really well. So I can assign the same assignment, the same activity in both places, and they can access the activity in either place, and it'll show it as completed in both platforms at once. So that's really great. I also did a live GimKit game with my students. So apparently that's like a good teacher trick to use right now. And I did an all school, so same GimKit game for all of my students, Spanish 1 through Spanish 4. During what was our spring break, although a different spring break than usual for a lot of my students. And I actually had 24 students during their spring break log in to play this live GimKit game. So either they were really, really bored or they really, really like GimKit, maybe a little bit of both. I also use a lot of Flipgrid, quizzes. I use Wiser as well. It's a good way to do online worksheets. And I've decided for now, as we're just getting used to the online teaching, also doing like a lot of fun stuff. And I've built a unit around the song Vivir Mi Vida by Mark Anthony, because it's a song that my students love. My students are obsessed with Mark Anthony, so much so that I ordered a Mark Anthony poster, and it's now up in my classroom. And it also has like a really uplifting message that's really appropriate for what we're all going through right now. So that's what I'm doing right now, is just like a really fun unit with a lot of fun, you know, like Quizlet games and GimKit games and things, those kinds of things with the song Vivir Mi Vida. Now, of course, everything's changed now that we're getting credit, and I'm going to start rolling out actual curriculum, but that's where
She frozen again.
Oh, she might have.
Am I here?
Yeah, you're here. Okay.
Okay, I guess I'll show you mine. So I can show you really quickly what mine looks like. So, I mean, I thought it was really important, especially with younger students, and I mean, probably with older students too, to have some sort of platform or like a platform that we've always used throughout the year in order to have all their resources. So it's kind of like a one shop, like they can go here, click it, and be done. Our um, our county uses Clever, but I mean it's very similar to like a Symbaloo, where like you could go to the website and then you would have all your links there of like where you need to go, like BrainPop, for example. Or if you were doing more things like Fluent Key or like Lalilo, BrainPop or like not Class Dojo. BrainPop is really nice for my students because we learn math and science in French. But I mean, this could also be probably given to some older students just for like what do you understand from this, like a topic that they already understand. Of course, I guess these videos are really hard because I mean, like if you're learning about fish, right? It's really hard because I mean they don't really know all the vocabulary, so it's kind of like I have to create my own questions and not really rely on the questions that Class Dojo is asking, because Class Dojo will ask, or sorry, because BrainPop is going to ask a lot more questions that are going to be more, I guess, geared towards even like students that are in France or like students that are maybe in Canada that have a higher proficiency. Um, I also use Lalilo, which is kind of a comprehension check for like younger kids. It deals with like phonetics, like what are like particular sounds. I also use Fluent Key, which is really cool for the kids because they get to see like different videos. We can change it to their level, probably more like a novice low level or novice mid level. It does it for a lot of languages, so it's always nice. It comes with like a quiz. So for example, you could watch this video and then you could even do an extension like in a Flipgrid if you really wanted to. It's kind of taking that same approach like with the TV5 Monde, where you have like the videos and then you have some questions like comprehension questions or like listening response questions that you would have afterwards. So I mean like TV5 Monde also does it by levels for French. I'm sure there are tons of resources for Spanish. And then I mean another thing that I try to do in my class lately is that we're trying to do a lot more cross-curricular material because we're also a STEM certified school. So for example, like code.org does a lot of, it has like lesson plans and a lot of the material can pop up in different languages. So for example, they can learn how to code as like an optional activity in French. The other thing is I actually, because we do have a lot of questions from parents, I use a Dropbox to show a particular checklist of all the materials that the students have to get done each week. So unlike Natalie, who gets to, you know, just go to be at school for like a day, I get to sit there from 7 to 3 every day to field questions from students, either through our learning management system or through our communication device, which is Class Dojo. And it's very time consuming. So it became to a thing where it was just easier to create checklists for students so that students could see what was being asked of them, what they had to do each week, and what kind of grades were being taken. And I mean, like this right here was mainly for the parents to know exactly what I was expecting from them or expecting from students and soft deadlines, because we can't really have like a hard deadline. If you didn't finish it by March 22nd, then I mean, you just get to do it next week until 2 weeks after or 2 weeks after we get back. And then they get a little check, students get to have a little checklist of, oh, I did 6 lessons of this, or I did 6 lessons of this, or I watched that video, that kind of thing. So yeah, that's pretty much what I do.
Yeah, I think that, thank you for bringing up deadlines because I totally forgot about that. Because like I'm just not in the habit of like, at first we were told that if we come back to school, then the students technically have 2 weeks upon return to turn in the work. So that kind of like raised questions of like, well, like what's the point? What are we doing? But you know, I have to say that I too have been putting like soft deadlines on my students too. And since we have to turn in our attendance by Saturday, like I need proof that you actually did something. So sometimes I tell them, okay, if you could please get like one of these activities done by Saturday so that it can say that you were here, you know, whether we did it synchronously or asynchronously, I still need proof that you attended my class, because if I don't have proof of that, I don't have a choice, but I have to mark you absent because that's the protocol that we were told to follow. So, but other than that, like we have to be flexible with deadlines, and I'm pretty much giving them like 2 weeks more or less, but mine are so on top of it, thank goodness. And I realize I'm very, very fortunate, but they're like, okay, what's next? What do I have to do? When do I have to turn this in? Like, and I'm like, oh my God, you know, and I'm used to that because that's how they were with me in the classroom. So really what I'm seeing is that my interactions with them, even though I'm from a distance or not, nothing has changed at all. And like they're able to manipulate the technology really well and really easily, and they're patient with me. Their parents have been exceptional as well, and I completely understand their moments of freaking out because this is a lot to handle across the board.
Yeah, I've not only been very flexible with deadlines, but I've also been very flexible with like redos. Basically, any student that emails me and says, "Oh, I didn't do as well on that like worksheet or ed puzzle or whatever," I'm like, "Cool, redo it, all good." I just think everything that's going on, you know, giving students like those second opportunities and those second chances is the least we can do, really.
Yeah. Anyway, so I guess in the end, what really our point was is that everybody's in the same boat, and there's a whole lot of adapting that everybody needs to do. But you know, oh, I just saw Lauren's question pop up. Yes, I'm totally guilty of working like 12 hours in front of my computer. Although I have to say, this week for tomorrow's assignments, I only spent 5 hours creating it, which is definitely better because it wasn't days. And I think at first it was just like panic mode of like, oh my God, I have to get all of this done. And then on top of that, it was, you know, we have to do like the nightly, or we have to schedule emails to be sent at a specific time in the morning, like on Wednesdays for our particular day. And our grades are still due on Friday. So I've been grading like a crazy person, you know, because I have to have everything in by the deadline. So it's tiresome. It's exhausting. But I guess, I don't know. I do go for walks. I need to get out. Otherwise, I'm really going to go crazy. But yeah.
I mean, I think it's also really important to set firm hours when you're available to students as well. So generally for us, it's, I mean, the time of the school, like the general school day, where like if you're online, now I'm online, then I'll answer your questions. And like if you're online for some reason at 12 o'clock doing the homework, then you just send me a message and I'll send it to you in the morning, and you'll just get my message later. So I mean, like for me, it's also really important to keep those hours and not to answer questions that are like at 11 o'clock at night or anything like that.
Yeah. Well, Shannon, should we go to some questions now from our audience?
Sure. I mean, we had a lot of suggestions, like some tools like Kahoot that can be used and Quizlet Live. And then so if people have questions, then feel free to type them in the chat. Lauren had a question earlier about whether, okay, she says, it is something you've already been using, so it isn't new to you or them. Can you simply ask if they have sufficient access to still use that and if their parents approve? I get the district concern, but if you were already using it, things haven't changed. What do you say to that?
Yeah, that's true. I'm actually finding myself in that situation with a really awesome app called Extempore, the speaking app. And you know what, to be honest, I haven't gotten a straight response, because the minute that we were told that we could do assessments, I said, oh, great, that's perfect. Then I can still continue to use what I've been using all the time. And then for some reason, all of a sudden, it was like the county was just jumping down and being like, and I think honestly, it might have come because of all this talk about Zoom. And, you know, is everything that we're using FERPA compliant? You know, and that's like the biggest thing that we have to deal with as K-12 teachers, because we're not dealing with adults and we can't just like, you know, put their privacy in danger at any time. So I really don't know what the answer has been yet to my response. The company did provide me with documentation that supports that they are compliant with it, and I haven't been asked to produce that just yet. So I really don't know. I don't know why all of a sudden there's this change going on.
I think, for example, like with Flipgrid, I think it's a question of accessibility. I can still give an optional assignment where the students can choose, or like the parents and students can choose to submit like a recording over Flipgrid, but I also have to give them other, I guess, alternative assignments. Like instead of doing a video recording, is it okay if they can do a audio recording, or if they can call like my Google Voice number in order to like answer the question, so that there's no recording, because I think it's just like it kind of goes back to that FERPA compliance.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's hard because I think districts also don't really know what to do either yet, because it's so unprecedented that everyone's kind of like, okay, so we're going to set this rule first, and then it's like, wait, there's a problem with this rule after we've talked to different people, and then we have to like retract that and like give you a different like policy. So it's like kind of like that time where everyone's trying to figure everything out. So
Sandhya asked a question, and then I also asked a similar question or related question. She asks, for those of you that moved to online learning, was there any training that was offered to parents or students to help them prepare for this transition? And then also I asked, what advice would you give parents both to make your life easier and to help their kids?
To answer the first question, no, there was no training. It was just like, bye, don't know when we'll see you again. How about go to your classroom and get everything that you need. Don't forget to scrub it down first and meet with your PLC, and you have like 1 hour to get your life together and then get out of here by 12. So that's how it played. That's how it played down for us. Those of us who have had training, or you know, who took a course like Edwige's program, you know, I was fairly calm, and my department was looking to me as a means of guidance, and you know, we're still doing that. And like I think what we see here, especially with like all of the Facebook groups that have like evolved and just continue to grow, it's just amazing the amount of support that teachers have formed for each other, literally all around the world. And I think that's a fantastic thing. But for us, no, there was no training about that whatsoever. Our parents also were not were given any kind of training at all. They're used to like the online grading platform, for example. My parents, I've trained them on Seesaw since day one. So that was their go-to. So they knew I was automatically going to be posting everything there. So they already knew that. So for them, it wasn't anything new. However, what I did hear back, some of the feedback from parents that they gave to the principal, was that each teacher is using a different platform. And so for them, it became really overwhelming. Let's say if you have 3 kids in the same household, that it became like, oh my God, we don't know like which teacher this is, what kid is this? Like, it was just really overwhelming. So what came out of that was we have to put specific titles in our emails that we send out. So, you know, like Michael said, one day we make a rule, the next day we change it, and then the week after that is like totally something else, but we just have to go with it, and that's it.
I mean, similar to that, my parents also did not have a lot of training. The students, so I mean, like when I was talking about there are a lot of resources now that are popping up, it's really hard for me to decide to use those resources because I've trained my students to use particular resources all year. So generally my students have training in those particular platforms or in those particular resources, but it's not to say that everyone in the entire school was doing those kind of trainings throughout the year. To help parents, we've been creating like different like walkthroughs or YouTube videos of how to log into the different platforms or the resources that we're using in the school. That kind of helps. And it's also going back to the idea of like keeping it very simple and not using too many different resources for our students so that it's easier on parents and on students. Because I mean, like you were saying, Natalie, like when there's like 3 or 4 people in the household, then it's really hard to like keep track of who's using what and like for who.
What was the other question?
Well, we're at 9 o'clock, at least for my time, and I didn't see any other big questions there. Do you see any more, Natalie? I want to thank everybody
for we give parents. Breathe.
Breathe.
I mean, I think that's what we're all trying to do, and I think that that we know it's crazy, and that we're with them on the same page too, and you know that any questions that parents have, that they should just reach out to us, because we totally understand how overwhelming this can be, you know, from both sides of the table, and the kids might adapt a whole lot easier to the technology because this is Gen Z and this is what they do and they live on it. But I can also understand why parents, you know, they need our help and they need our guidance to make sure that their child is doing what they're supposed to be doing for their education.
The Montfort in my district, which I think is lovely, from, you know, admin all the way from the top to down to teachers, has been extending a lot of grace to everybody. Extend grace to yourself, extend grace to your students, to the parents. And I think that that's just good advice in general right now for parents and for teachers and students.
Definitely good advice. Thank you so much, Michael and Erin and Natalie, for sharing your time and expertise and your experience with us today. I think we all had a good conversation. Everybody else was giving great suggestions as well. Thank you so much for doing this, especially at the last minute.
You're welcome. And don't panic, everybody. You got this.